Welcome to the Love Letters and Books podcast, Jess. It's so nice to have you here.
It's nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, this is my first episode of this podcast, and of course, I had to pick my favorite writer of my favorite book of the year and have you join me. So, thank you so much for saying yes and doing this today. But I would love to share with the audience how I found you because I think it's really interesting and telling and part of the story and the culture of today. And it's that I just went on TikTok and I was kind of diving into a mindless scroll, and you popped up on my screen and you were sharing about the dedication to your book. And I was immediately hooked. I immediately purchased the book. I couldn't wait till it came out. And I would love for you to share with the audience what that dedication was and why you wrote it and shared it and why you put it on TikTok.
So, the dedication that I read out loud was a dedication to my psychiatrist, where I told him that it was actually the proof of my book that I was giving to him. So, it wasn't like the actual copy. There still was, some problems that needed to be addressed. But I said that it was proof that I did what I never thought I could, because I spent my entire life thinking that I would never write a book. I'd always wanted to, but I always, I doubted it. So it was proof of my inner strength, proof that I can accomplish my dreams, and more so than that, proof that I had a great support system, that I had a great doctor, and I had a great husband. So I wanted to give my doctor, because I do feel like so many doctors kind of go without proper thanking. So I thanked him in that dedication where it says, okay, this is proof that I did what I could, but it's also proof that you did an amazing job. It's proof that you have made an impact on the world and in my life. And it's proof that you saved my life. So I wanted him to have that proof.
Beautiful. Well, I'm so glad I found you and have dived into this world that you've created that I absolutely love. And I can't wait for more. But let's introduce you to the audience. So tell us who you are, what you do. Tell us about the book that you wrote.
I'm J.M. Zamudio. I also go by Jess. And I wrote a Regency romance set in 1810 between a low-born former soldier with PTSD and a high-class lady that's down on her luck. And it is this slow burn romance where these people just, it's kind of like a star-crossed lovers type of thing. Like society says no, like their circumstances say no, but they're still drawn to each other in this way. And it's their love story of how they go from, this rifle invention contest that has this huge grand prize that'll completely change both of their lives. Like they both are in this team where he's working with her brother. And there's all of this, shenanigans where, they're kind of hiding it because they're hiding their feelings from themselves as well. And eventually it just kind of, it all goes downhill from there, where it's like, okay, this is a love worth fighting for. And that's exactly what they do.
Oh, and in the middle of it, the plot starts plotting. This book had me in a state. I think I sent you a DM and told you that I read it in 24 hours. And I was like, I can work later because I need to finish this book right now. But tell us more about your two main characters because I absolutely loved them. And from the first page, I was sucked into this story. So tell us about them.
And that's so funny that you said that, you read it within 24 hours, because I've had other people reach out to me and says, thanks for the 3 hours of sleep that I got last night. And I was like, oh, you're welcome. But so my two main characters are Seth and Cassandra. So Seth he's this former soldier. He was raised his entire life to basically be the perfect soldier. And when he actually went to war, he realized what it meant to be a soldier and what it meant to be a hero, because for his entire life it's like, this is the role for you. And once it got to his dark night of the soul, he had to take a step back and say, you know what, this is not actually what I want. This is not authentic to me. And so he's dealing with all of his own problems. And meanwhile, along the way, all he wants is freedom. So he wants open skies. He wants a place where no one's bothering him, where no one's looking down on him, where he can heal and he can just be. So that's his goal. That's Seth in a nutshell. And then you have Cassandra, who the cornerstone of her character is that she deeply loves her family. So she is in a circumstance after losing both of her parents where her family is in financial straits. It's only the three of them. So it's only herself, her brother Matthew, and her younger sister Caroline. It's very much them against the world. So she spends almost the entire book just trying to stay afloat, just trying to, stay above water. And that literally means her putting herself on the chopping block where it's like, okay, I have to find a rich husband because during that time, that was one of the women's only way of actually going forward is someone else has to take care of my problems for me. And so when we first start the book, that's her goal is to find a wealthy husband so that she can secure her future, not only for herself, but for her younger sister, Caroline. So it was really dependent on her to make a good match because her choices extended to the rest of her family and reputation was such a huge thing. So she really needed to marry well. And that was kind of her goal, but it wasn't authentic to her character. Like what she wanted was to find a wealthy husband, but what she needed was love.
One thing that stood out to me so much as I was reading this book is that, yes, it's set in the 1800s in England, and so many of the themes were relatable at such a core level that you could resonate with Cassandra's sort of turmoil of how am I supposed to show up in the world? What do I actually want? Am I allowed to ask for what I want? And how come asking for what I want affects everyone else? How unfair is that? So tell us a little bit about that in your writing process. Is that something that just happens magically, or did you keep that in mind when you were writing that you wanted people to be able to resonate with this, but still be true to the Regency romance? Because someone could hear Regency romance and think, I won't relate. I over related to the story and I loved it. And how did you get us there?
So I have struggled with the human experience, so to speak, my entire life. And I think that's something that is really core to my story because I couldn't write it any other way other than, my own authentic emotions. And I did want it to have that resonation where someone's like, "Oh yeah, this could have totally happened to me." Like, "Oh, I could have totally had tea with Cassandra and talked at length about all of these different problems." But it really did. It just kind of came out of me. And as I wrote it and as I went through the story, it just got deeper. I start out with this very rough idea of how I want to write, where it's like, okay, I want to write an emotional experience, and then I just kind of run with it, and whatever comes out, comes out. So it surprises me all the time what's on the page. I was like, there's no way I could have ever written this. But I do think it just comes from the heart, and it just comes from, like you're pouring your soul out.
I was really shocked at how much it did resonate. And I really wondered about that of, is this intentional? How does someone do this? How does someone make this relatable at a core level, right? It's not just about the details in the story. It's about the feelings. Everyone can resonate with what Cassandra was going through at some point in their life. And you shared that so beautifully.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But it did. It just kind of came out of me. And my writing process, it's so intuitive. So I just kind of write until it feels right. Like I will reread a chapter over and over again as I'm working on it. And I'm just like, okay, move a little bit here, move this detail down here. And then once I feel like, okay, as a reader, I'm enjoying this experience. As a reader, I'm resonating with it. Then that's what I run with.
Amazing. Well, let's take a look at Seth now because he was one of my favorite main male characters ever written. And one of the things that I thought was so powerful about this book and about his story is you're talking about PTSD. And that really was not the language at the time. We still have a difficult time talking about that and attaching it to the things that we experience, but he's very clearly going through something in the book. One, what made you want to incorporate that into this story? And talk to me about how you wove it in so beautifully, because you really did.
So when I first started writing Memories of You, Seth was completely different. Like he was this confident character, he was an entirely different lifestyle. But I wanted something that was a little bit more real because I wasn't sure if I was ever going to write another book again. So I figured if I'm only going to do the one, I'm going to do it right. So for me, I actually struggle with PTSD myself. So it was kind of in a way, it was very healing because if you have PTSD, like you're still a normal human being, like you're still going about your life, you're still finding love, you still have your daily tasks to do, But while you do that, you also have this constant companion of trauma. And with Seth, especially, even though he has these external goals, he's still struggling the most with what's inside of him and coming to terms with that. Because for, the first half of the book, he's very much kind of dealing with it by himself and he's kind of shutting it down until he can't anymore. And then once that happens, he has this support system that is like, we've been here this whole time and we're willing to help you. And for me, with my life, I've found that. I found this support system that was there willing to help me. So I wanted to talk not only about the trauma, but about the community that is willing to help you when that happens. And that just kind of came out of me. That was another thing. Like I just say, like, oh, I more or less I birthed this thing that, but when I wove the trauma because it was so central to his character, it is part of his cornerstone. That was just as much important to me as to not just the what Seth was going through himself, but how it affected everyone around him.
Well, let's go a little bit deeper into that because the relationships in the book are so interesting and the themes that come up in the book, and people could say tropes or whatever it is, but I was thinking of them as themes. And one of them was almost this found family and how challenging that is to recognize in our own lives. So it's so beautiful when it comes up in a book, but also this family piecing themselves back together after grief. And at some point in the book, it turns into brunches and things like that. There's one example of that is that they come together and they almost celebrate in this routine, regular fashion. So talk to us about that choice of not just the PTSD and the struggles Cassandra's also going through, but with this support group. And that's obviously not the terms that were used at the time, but this sort of resource that these people have around themselves, this emotional resource. And we see it throughout the book with all the relationships. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
So I really did want to have complex relationships in the book because I feel like that's authentic to the human experience. Like we all have problems with people that we know, whether or not they're from our past, whether or not they're sitting right next to you. There's like my book has a lot of antagonists that are causing problems. But even then, like they're dealing with their own things, with their own lens, so to speak. And with Found Family, that was important to me because not only did the main character Seth not have any sort of support group growing up, but Cassandra too had hers ripped away from her. So it was really important for them to kind of fix that throughout the story to the point where it's like, okay, no, I actually have a great family. And even though I had to build it myself, it doesn't lessen its importance and it doesn't lessen its effect in any sort of way. And I had a lot of that, like in my own personal life, where people are like, you know what, you're ours. Like we've adopted you. And I wanted to bring that into my story that family isn't just the people that you share your blood with, it's the people that show up.
Powerful. And I think that's probably why it resonated so much. It was this different lens through which we could look through that. And it's not in our contemporary setting, but it's been happening throughout history where people have been showing up for each other and connecting with each other and rebuilding after loss. So, one of the other themes in the book that was woven throughout, actually through so many of the relationships, was this pressure to not let people down. So many of the characters in this book had a weight on their shoulders and they were trying so hard to make things work. Let's touch on that for a bit because it wasn't just one person. Quite a few people felt that way in this book. So, why was that something that you wove throughout the story and didn't just put on one character? Why did so many people feel that way?
Because I feel like in life, everyone feels that way, that, your decisions don't just affect you. And I really wanted to get that as real to the human experience as possible, where you can make these choices, but that doesn't mean that they don't have consequences. All of the choices that you make have consequences, good or bad, on the people that surround you, especially if those people rely on you for safety or security. If you make the wrong move, then you could potentially end up making disastrous consequences. And that's everybody. So I did want to give that to every single character where, they're all connected because that's how people are in real life. Everyone's connected.
Well, one of the other things that came up, and I don't want to give too much away in the book, and I don't think that I am, is that it was about the nature of relationships shifting through love, kindness, and compassion versus through force. Because some of the relationships in this book really do change because somebody takes a step back and says, I'm going to try something different right now. And I'm going to show up with love and connection and see if maybe that's new for you. So, where did that come from? Because that was a really interesting sort of twist in the book.
So one of the major themes of my book is, is redemption, and it's love. It's a love story at its core. So you do have to kind of take that love. And at first, when you have these characters, they're very nearsighted. They can only see what's in front of them. But then they take a step back and say, okay, all of these different ways that I've been trying to fix this problem have failed. All of these different ways that I've been going about it. So maybe if I shift, maybe if I try it just a little bit, this small incremental shifts of love and acceptance, then maybe that's the way, maybe that's the secret to it all. And it was.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, it was probably just one of the many reasons this book resonated so much, and I just couldn't put it down. But one of the thoughts I was having as I was nearing the end of the book was, oh, I hope this isn't the last book because I am invested in this world. I am so invested in these characters. So, talk to us about that. What is next? Because Memories of You is so impactful. Yes, it does work as a standalone, but once you're in this world, you don't really want to leave. So, what can we expect?
So I had the exact same feeling, once I'm in this world, I don't want to leave. And that's still true. So I am actually working on the next two books right now simultaneously. I'm working on Matthew and Caroline's book at the same time. And for me, like, it's a little messy, but the thoughts come to me, just randomly. They'll come to me in like two paragraphs at a time. So I'll plug them in. But I very much love the world that I created. I love these characters. Matthew is actually my favorite character. He is this globe, more or less, that everyone else kind of revolves around. And I'm writing his story right now. I love it, but I actually really like Caroline's story too. I was so tempted to publish hers first because I feel like it'll be done faster. But what's really great about historical romances is not only is it welcome to do that, it's expected. So you have this family group, and every single one of the characters gets their own story. So you can read them as a standalone. But like if you read Cassandra's book and then Matthew's and then Caroline's, there's actually this overarching story. It's almost like an episode in a TV show. So I'm definitely continuing it.
Well, you just made my day. So, I'm very excited about that. That's amazing. And one of the things that I noticed on TikTok, because I obviously watch all of your videos and I just love what you share, is you share your process. And I think that's really important because just taking a step back from writing, just in life, we tend to talk ourselves out of things because we look at someone's final product and we say, oh, they just woke up and looked like that. They just woke up and did that. They just ended up on the top of the mountain. They weren't sweating and struggling and doing all of these things. And I think in one of your videos, you shared a notebook. And I was like, girl, I do that too. Like I write everything down. It's messy, it's all over the place. And I think that just made me feel like this was, I don't know, that the creative process was more open, more attainable. It didn't have to be as linear. It could be a circuitous path. And maybe that's not a problem. Maybe that's perfect for you as a creative or a writer. So I would love for you to talk about that because I see you on TikTok and you're sharing very generously, sort of from the big sister perspective of, hey, if you're a new writer and you're doing this, this is my process. So talk to us about that whole thing. Why did you start sharing those videos? And talk to us a little bit about your process.
So the reason that I first started sharing those videos is because I struggled a lot. So I have actually, like, throughout this entire process, I've connected with other authors, and something that I've learned and something that keeps coming up is that the moment that you stop trying to write a book the way everyone else is telling you how to write a book is you will actually write the book. So everyone's brain is so completely different. And for me, I was always trying, because I actually have a degree in English. So I was always trying to write it, from start to finish, from A to Z. Like it will just come up naturally. And that's not how my brain works. So the story comes to me in bits and pieces as I'm going about my day. So for me, it's really important to have that notebook down because the notebook does a couple of things. It allows me to have stream of thought without having a delete button. It slows down my brain, and it's something tangible for me to flip through really quick so I can kind of compare and contrast different ideas. And I really do, within my first couple of drafts, I really just pray at this point. But I do share that because I feel like there's a lot of writers out there that say, you know what, I don't know if I can do it this way. And it's like, okay, well, just play around with your brain. And if you figure out the way that your brain works, you'll have so much of an easier time. And earlier you said that, you open a book and you're like, this is someone just wrote this from start to finish and it was perfect. And that's not the case at all. My creative process is so messy. I go through so many different drafts because for me, I have a hard time figuring out what my story is. And until I figure out what my story isn't, then I can't really write it as it is. And even then, it changes so much. Like my story evolves, is what I'd say. So I'll start off with this very rough idea of how I want it to go. So for Memories of You, I knew I wanted to write like a best friend's sister, brother's best friend type of romance. And then you start out with that one idea. That's all you need is this one idea. And then you can kind of connect all of these different thoughts to it. And for me, that's the easiest way to do it in a notebook. But if you do it on sticky notes, if you do it on a whiteboard or, in chalk in your driveway, it doesn't matter. Just get the thoughts out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure that there's someone who's going to listen to this episode who feels as if they have a story inside of them. And so, one of the pieces of advice I always share with the young women that I work with about podcasting and writing and creating is that there is someone out there who needs to hear your story. I promise you. And even if it's just that one person, they need to hear it. So, I try to encourage that. Of course, it's always hard to take my own advice. But what would you say to someone listening right now who does feel like they have that story inside of them and there's some kind of block, something preventing them from putting pen to paper, or even whispering their idea into the universe? Can you talk to them?
So if you have a story that's inside your heart and it keeps coming up and it keeps coming up and you love it so much, other people will relate to that, even if it's just one person. Like on my TikToks, I posted, like if you need a big sis pep talk, come to me. And that's 100% true. So anyone that's listening to this, if you have this moment where you're like, man, I don't know if I can do this, come to me because I will tell you how wrong you are. I will tell you that you are more than capable of telling a story and that stories themselves, like writing itself, isn't a talent that you have within you. It's a skill and it's something that, when you first start writing, you're not going to like what you write, but that doesn't mean that it's not good. It's something that has to be polished. So when you first get those raw thoughts out there, just consider them as that. They're just raw thoughts. But you can take these pieces and you can build a story from them. And you should. And if you feel like you have to, it's a drive. So if it's your calling, it'll keep calling you. And if it's in the back of your mind and it's calling you, answer that call. Start writing it down. Start writing it down any way you can. Do it in crayon if you have to. Just get the thoughts out there because everyone says it that you can't edit a blank page, and it's totally true. It is so much easier to edit something that exists if you kind of take a step back from perfection and just make it exist first and make it pretty later.
Oh, I love that. That's such powerful advice. And I feel like we need to be having those conversations because some of us don't even get to putting pen to paper, right? We can talk ourselves out of it. One of the things I wanted to touch on, it's so funny because I saw a TikTok the other day of a clip from the John Bernthal podcast, and he was talking with one of his former cast members, and she was explaining to him the game Dungeons and Dragons. And he was like, I don't get it. So how do you win? She's like, it's not about winning. It's about great storytelling. It's about telling that great story. So what are the things that contribute to you telling a great story? Because I know things that prevent us, right? That insecurity or that self-editing to the point where we don't put anything on the page, or the lack of curiosity or feeling, oh, I'm weird for wanting to talk about that. But what contributes to you telling a great story?
Something that I use in order to try to tell a good story is I'm really heavy on story structure. I have more of a logical brain than a creative brain. So I'm constantly taking all of these different ideas from all of these different medias that I have. Like, so one of the things when I first started learning how to tell a good story is watching the way other people do it. So if you read a book and you just love it, and it sits with you and it's something that you carry on for the rest of your day, I look at it in a more of like a scientific light where it's like, what makes this a good story? What makes it good? And that's something that I tried to do. Like there's actually a book called Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. And it is my favorite book of all time. I love it so much because it has action. It's a slow burn. It has a hero that is just like dedicated to his lady. But even in that, there's change and there's redemption. So there's this characters who are like they're flawed. They're, very much doing what they're own trying to do. And then like having them open and having them blossom. Like for me, that's a good story. It's not what's going on, it's the characters themselves. So I really do try to do everything from like a character basis. And then what I'll do is I'll plug it into that like rising fall of a story structure. It's like, okay, in a romance, it's like this kind of, it's a cliche where it's like, 3 dates and then a breakup. And I don't like the breakup. So there's more or less like three good things that happen to these characters that kind of like every step of the way, they're like, okay, yes, this is love. This is like, this is deep love. This is like, oh yeah, we're all in. And that's how people are in general. They're like, oh, I don't know about this. Sometimes you fight against it. Sometimes you're all in. But I try to look at everything like a textbook. What makes this story good? What makes me feel that? And then I try to do that in my own work.
Really helpful. And I love that you're kind of giving us insight into your process. I think that's really beautiful and generous. So thank you. But let's take a turn because you did something big this year. You published your book. And I want to talk about what that experience with visibility felt like, right? It's one thing when we share our drafts with the people we love and they care about us. And sometimes that's really hard and cringy to do as well, right? Because we're letting them into our brains, our creative brains. But what is it like putting yourself out there into the unknown, to the public, to the compliments, the comments, the criticism, and opening that creative side of yourself to someone else?
It's terrifying. so when so when I first started putting myself out there, I was absolutely terrified. I was like, you know what? There's no way. Like, yeah, I wrote the book, but now I have to share it with people. Now people have to read it. Are you crazy? But every time that I doubted myself, I was like, New York Times bestselling author James Zamudio. I can't get there if nobody reads my book. So there's like something online where it's like Delulu until it's Trululu. So I really took that like delusion where it's like I'm the only one that's self-conscious about this, and that's something that my grandma said too, is because I actually wrote a spicy book. So everyone who has my spicy book, I know them personally. And she's like, "You're the only one that thinks it's weird." So that's something that I really take to heart. Anytime that I'm about to post a video or anytime I'm about to, put myself out there, I'm the only one who thinks it's weird. And even if that's not true, that's a truth that I tell myself.
Yeah.
It's just do it anyway. So that's another one that I tell myself is that I'm afraid every step of the way. I was afraid to publish my book. I was afraid to put myself out there, but I did it anyway. So just be afraid and do it anyway is my motto.
Oh, I love that. Well, hey, I'm in that space. You know that I put out quite a few different podcast shows, and you never know the comments you get. One of my favorite comments of all time was a man who said, "I've listened to every single episode that you put out, and you just talk too much." I was thinking, like, I'm sorry. You found me on the internet. You listened to every single episode that I put out, but you think that my podcast involves me talking too much, and you keep going, and then you wanted to tell me about it. And so sometimes it's really challenging when we get the feedback, and protecting ourselves, protecting our creativity, protecting our willingness to put things out there. Is there anything that you have to do aside from grandma's advice, which was amazing, to navigate this landscape, right? Because people put out books 50 years ago and they weren't dealing with social media. They weren't dealing with feedback. They weren't dealing with sites where people rated or commented. Is there anything that you could say to someone who's in that space where they're particularly struggling with that and maybe almost hesitating to share their creativity because, God, you never know that feedback you're going to get or how someone's going to perceive you?
So I actually have two different things to say to this. One of them is that not everyone's going to like what you put out. There are books that I have not finished at all because I didn't like them, and then they get these huge accolades and they get these rewards. So that's the number one thing is that not everyone's going to like you. And that's okay because the other thing is that people will really love you. And that was the thing that was actually the least expected is because I wasn't expecting anyone to read my book at all. Like, I really do put myself out there on social media in order to try that, but I wasn't expecting it at all. And to get, this massive wave of support and people saying, oh no, I actually really liked your book, that that offsets all of that negativity because when I wake up, because I have something dinging at my phone at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's a DM from TikTok saying, "I can't sleep. These characters better be okay," or like I'm gonna come for you. And even then, I was like, okay, cool. I'm creating an emotional response in this person, and that for me, like. Even if I get, 21-star reviews, even if, someone says, hey, I don't like your content, I don't like this, there are people who have read my book in 24 hours. There are people who have not been able to put my book down. And I'm not writing my book for those 21-star reviews. I'm writing it for that one person who can't put it down.
Oh, I love that. And I think that someone needs to hear that today because it is hard to put yourself out there and to hear so much constant feedback. It's almost a machine, and you think, oh, I don't really want to be a part of that. And in my own little world of putting out podcasts, it's hard for me too sometimes. I struggle with that. I also struggle with when I put out an episode. Obviously, my other podcast is focused on mental health, and I'm talking about trauma. And everyone in my life who I don't regularly talk to sends me an email about the podcast episode that they listened to about trauma that I put out. And there's just part of me that cringes inside. And I so appreciate them listening. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're about to have a really uncomfortable conversation. But I do feel like that's almost an exercise of just showing up and trusting that there are these threads that connect people, that people
Mhm.
feel similarly or have similar experiences, and they need to hear your voice about it too. And if we can get past that little cringe moment, it is really powerful when we can connect or you can inspire that emotion in people. I had that reaction. I hadn't even read your book. I had a timer on my phone to remind me to check my Kindle. No, full on. I could not wait to read it. And then I just sat in my living room and was like, no one bother me. You know what I mean? I sat there with my cat and I just dove into this story. And I think I was like, just, you know, kind of like eking within the first two chapters. And I was just like, I cannot wait. I just know this is going to be so good. So yeah, there's that side of it too, of when people we know read our work and we're kind of living in those two lives of like, I'm this person who has this role in your life, and I'm also creative. And this is you entering into my storytelling. Is there anything you'd like to share about that part of it?
So I have actually given my book as gifts to people, people that I know in my life that are readers or, people that have really supported me. And one of them that I gave to was actually my grandmother-in-law. And my in-laws are a really loud family. Like there's talking all the time. And I'm an introvert, so I just kind of, keep to myself. But she really believed in me. So she gave me all of these books and, I kind of treated them as a textbook. My dedication to her was actually, thanks, Nana, for all the books. Here's one for you. And she said, "Oh wow, I didn't realize you had so much to say." And I said, "Oh yeah, I have enough to say for at least two more books for sure." um, but it's such a wild experience having other people read your book and having other people like your book.
You know, there's someone out there who has probably a big story inside themselves and they almost don't want to share it because they're kind of nervous about, my uncle's girlfriend's going to read it and, what does that look like? And it's about really taking up space as a creative and how important that is. So, Jess, what I really need to know is what are you reading these days? You mentioned a book earlier that you loved. Can you tell us maybe a few more books that inspired you as well?
Yes, so I've actually been heavily inspired by Lisa Kleypas. She writes beautiful historical romance set in more or less the same era that I'm writing. So I drew a lot of inspiration from her. I drew a lot of inspiration from Julia Quinn and also from Mary Balogh. For me, like they're the holy trifecta. They are the ladies of historical romance. And one of the reasons that I started writing is because I used to farm. So I had spent all of this time listening to audiobooks through Libby. It's a library app. I actually listen to almost all of the books that I read. I actually listen to them as I'm kind of going about the day because I do, I have a very active lifestyle. When I found Lisa Kleypas, I was like, oh, I'm going to love this. I'm going to love everything that she writes. And so I just went down her list. So I've started with The Wallflowers. So that's 4 books. And the third book of the Wallflower series is Devil in Winter. And that's something that's like well known in the historical romance community for being one of the best books ever. And so I was like, okay, I want to stand toe to toe with Lisa Kleypas. I was totally delusional, but I had listened to all of her books. And I had listened to all of Julia Quinn's books, where she wrote the Bridgerton series. And there's these family dynamics that they both write about. And it's the same with Mary Balogh. They write within this family, and there's all of these interconnected plot points. And I just love that. And I was like, you know what? I've listened to enough of these. I feel like I can do this. I feel like I can actually like contribute to this genre where you have these high stakes, where every small touch is meaningful, where, the flash of an ankle is scandalous. And then the characters just kind of lean into that, where, they're finding love when society says that love is wrong, where you have to marry for wealth or for status, where you have these impossible odds and these people find love anyway and they overcome it. And I thought that that was just beautiful. And of course, the setting is amazing. You have, these pretty dresses, you have tea parties, but more than that, you have the darkness under all of this glamour. And I just completely fell in love with it. And I was like, you know what? I bet I can do this. So I studied every single one of those books like a textbook. And I'm like, okay, what do I really like from here? And from Devil in Winter, I loved that action. I loved pining. I loved forced proximity, where these people are kind of like fighting their attraction for each other when they're having to sit next to each other every single day. And then in that, you can really get worn down. Like your character can be like, you know what? Let me start opening up my horizons. Let me start doing this. So I really wanted to do that with my book as well. And I really just hope that I have. I hope that someone else can like pick up my book and be like, you know what? This is great. I want to write a book just like this, because that's exactly what happened to me with Lisa Kleypas.
Oh, I can't wait to dive in. I'm going to need your reading list. You're going to have to send me an email afterwards, because this was sort of my introduction, reintroduction into historical romance. Obviously, when I was younger, I'm sure I read all the books that everyone else read: Count of Monte Cristo, Wuthering Heights, Pride and Prejudice. You go down the list of like certain types of books. As an adult, this probably wasn't the genre that I would normally pick up. And apparently I'm all in, and I can't wait for your next book. And no pressure, but people are waiting. I'm just kidding. So, Jess, the name of this podcast is Love Letters and Books. And much like I do on my other podcast, Love Letters and Mixtapes, I'd really love to hear your love letter that you can share with the audience.
Yes, of course. So I wrote a love letter to my younger self, from the kid version up until the moment that I decided to write this book. So it does really span a large length of time that I'm talking to myself, but I'll go ahead and read it to you right now. It says, Dear Past Jess, you're going to finish your book. No, really, I mean it. You'll spend your life doubting you have what it takes, but you will. It'll take time to figure out how your brain works, but once you do, you'll write a beautiful book. You will pour your entire heart into it, and it'll resonate with people just like you always dreamed. If I could tell you anything, I'd tell you not to stop dreaming. I'd hug you and I'd tell you not to give up, that it just isn't time yet. I'd say that imposter syndrome is another mean voice telling you that you aren't good enough. You are good enough. You'll learn to ignore that voice and all of the other mean voices and use them to make characters people will hate, and that'll be a good thing. You'll see. You'll write romance, love stories that you never thought in a million years you could write. You'll write a book people will lose sleep over, and that'll be a good thing too. It'll be hard work, long hours, thinking you won't ever finish, but you will. You did. You'll sit at that desk and give us the gift of a book. Every word you have is practice. You'll learn to see it as part of a messy process instead of seeing yourself as a failure. You've got this. I'll be here at the end of the finish line holding our book, saying thank you. See you when you get here. Love, Jess, the author.
Oh, that was so beautiful. Jess, thank you for being so generous and sharing all of that with us. And so, to kind of wind down, where can people find you? I'm obviously going to put links in the show notes, but where can they connect with you? Where can they find your book? And remind us again the name of your book and just all the information we need.
I am on every social that you can think of. You'll be able to find me under Zamudio author. I am most active on TikTok, but I'm also on Threads. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Pretty much everything you can think of, I'm there. You'll be able to find me there. And my books are exclusively on Amazon right now, so you can get the paperback, you can get the ebook, and if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can actually read my book through your subscription. It's called Memories of You by J.M. Zamudio.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandmixtapes@gmail.com.